that. I know you like that. How long you been back, man? I see the girls in the club, they're getting wild for me. And all the pretty chicks all want to.
Welcome into the Saturday show, everybody. Hope you're doing well on this Saturday morning. My name is Jake Hatch. Joined as always, we have Michelle Bodkin. Michelle, how are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
Oh, I'm not doing too bad. It's crazy to think that 2024 is like here, Michelle. It seems like 2023 flew by, but that seems to happen every single year, kind of in the industry that we're in, right?
Oh, completely and totally true. And especially when I think you have a year of chaos, like
Sure,
it felt like
too.
2023 was.
Yeah, no doubt about that, because there's a bunch of things, a bunch of upheaval, it feels like, in the world of sports that we'll get to. The whole idea of today's show for Michelle and I is we're kind of go back through the top stories of what happened during 2023 for the local sports, teams, programs, Utah, BYU, the Jazz. We'll even get to some Utah State tomorrow. So we'll have a lot of fun. But, Michelle, let's start the show, and obviously let's get everybody's highlight of the week. So I'm going to have you fire off first.
Yeah, so I've been off all week, so if you all are wondering why I've been so quiet and have not said anything online or really written anything, it's because I've taken time off. I'm actually technically off today too, but felt like doing the radio, so we're doing radio. It's been nice though to just not really do anything or worry about anything. I've watched all the games. I watched the Runnin' Utes last night, but didn't have to do anything with it. So it's sometimes nice to just take a step back and just enjoy things for what they are.
Hey, that's actually a very good thing. How was your Christmas overall as well?
It was good. It was very, very low key. I was kind of in zombie mode because I had just more or less, I had just gone back from Las Vegas covering the Vegas Bowl, and myself and Andrea Urban decided to hit the town and try and have the Las Vegas experience after the bowl game wrapped up. And then I did not go to sleep at all that night because it was just kind of we'll just stay out, do the Vegas things, and then I will grab my suitcase and head to the airport. So...
Okay.
So I was kind of recovering from that. I'm too old to do that.
Okay.
But I'll probably be convinced to do it again at some point in my life because,
Hey, you got to do it sometimes, right? That's
sometimes,
the biggest thing.
yes.
Yeah, no doubt. Highlight of my week just really was Christmas, hanging out with my kids and my extended family, I guess I should say. And a lot of my wife's in-laws were in town, so just kind of mentioning kind of low-key, Michelle. But yeah, it was just nice to kind of kick back, not have to really worry about anything, and just kind of enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, that's really kind of the key, right? Is to just kind of get that quality time in and just enjoy a day. And sometimes that's really hard to do in this industry because it just never shuts off. But thankfully everybody was kind of nice to us and allowed us to have, a nice Christmas. So
Sure, no doubt. Christian, what do you got for this week?
Christmas, first Christmas with my wife as a married couple, so that was fun. I went over to her parents' house, my in-laws. They live in Las Vegas, so traveled over there. Got in late Saturday night after the Utah State bowl game, and then spent, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and then another day. Flew back, but that was pretty fun. Yeah, got to watch all her little nieces and nephews open presents, and got some fun gifts of our own. So them living in Vegas, it's kind of tough to see them, so I always like to go see them when I can.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense. I totally understand that. And it is. Thankfully my family all lives here, mostly in Utah. But I have some family scattered elsewhere, including Las Vegas. And so, yeah, it's always nice to get time in with people that aren't maybe as easily accessible.
Yeah, and I didn't do the whole, downtown Vegas thing.
You're smart.
Well, it's funny, all the people that live there, they hate it. They can't stand downtown Vegas. So when I go to my in-laws' house, we never go downtown, do any of that stuff. But yeah.
Same with my relatives that live down there. They're like, the Strip? Yeah, right.
Yeah, don't go there, right?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess we should kind of get into the meat and potatoes of what we're doing today. Let's get into what's the big deal.
Do you know who I am?
No, I can't say that I do.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal. I'm very important. I have
Christian, you got me.
many leather-bound books, and my apartment smells of rich mahogany.
All right, time for not technical fouls. Wow, that was a big faux pas. We'll
Was
get
a
to
technical foul?
It was a technical foul on me right there for starting off the show in the wrong way. But what's the big deal? Now, Michelle, we're going to talk kind of about like the different big stories going on and all the different big teams for the year in review. But before we get to that, I wanted to. You mentioned the fact that you've been watching the most of the games. You watched the running Utes last night. You've been watching college football. Before we look back at all of it, I kind of want to get your feel for last week because we did a Saturday show, but it was before the bowl games really kicked off. So let's start off on the Utah front. Let's be honest, that was a rather boring bowl game between Northwestern and Utah. Give me your overall sense of how things went for Utah in that game.
You know, in a lot of ways, it did not surprise me that it went the way that it did. We
Okay.
knew that a lot of people were going to be missing, I think especially on the offensive side of the ball.
Sure.
And it just seemed like probably they would lack some firepower, and that indeed proved to be true. I think, you also had some, if we're being honest, I don't think anybody meant to be a distraction, but I mean, you have the distraction of Bryson Barnes is, here, but he's kind of looking toward the future. You have, at that time, it was just kind of the rumors and the rumblings of what's happening with Jaquindon Jackson, and what's he going to choose to do. And I'm trying to remember who else. But, so, I mean, you have some of that kind of stuff going on too. But I think overall we got a good look at some of the young kids, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And the defense was also missing quite a few key players. And I thought those young guys stepped up and did a really, really good job. Anytime you get a fourth down goal line stand, you're doing something right. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty impressive. Again, the offense was what it was. To be honest, I don't think anyone should have been really terribly shocked or disappointed by that. But I hope, and I see people make comments about, oh my God, if this is what this looks like next year, it's not going to look like that next year. No. Provided that we don't see the injuries that we saw this past year, which I don't expect. I think, They paid their price to the health gods, and they should be good to go for another couple of years before something like that hopefully happens. But it's this team will ultimately end up being just fine. Like, I'm not worried about it. You can't really take a whole lot from this season and apply it to next season. This season was one of one.
Sure.
And I just don't think it's really going to apply or hold a lot of precedence for what happens next year when Utah moves to the Big 12.
Now, the whole thing with Jaquindon Jackson, you're right, it was kind of percolating out there in the ether, as it were, and we were all kind of like, okay, what's actually happening here? And then he does announce he didn't announce it until afterwards, but the word came out that he had entered the transfer portal. Do you have any intel on why? Because this is a guy who's a starting running back for Utah. It seems strange. Of all the people that have transferred and entered the transfer portal for Utah, him seems to be kind of the one that's like, what in the world is going on here?
Yeah, that was one that I think really hurt, and even I felt myself doing it. Like, no, like you can't go, like, And I think a lot of that, at least from my perspective, is I'm a storyteller. That's primarily what I do. That's my strength in this industry, and he has a phenomenal story, and I so wanted to see that finish out with Utah, but not to be. And, I think a lot of it comes down to Utah. We all know, we've all heard, you and I have talked a lot off air, about various players from
Sure.
both Utah and BYU that have gone some pretty crazy offers from, bigger programs. And so far, for the most part, Utah and BYU have been able to stave those people off. But we all knew that everybody's kind of working with borrowed time, and the time would come when an offer was maybe too good and would kind of land in the right person's lap that they would want to take that opportunity and that offer. And that's just more or less, I think, what happened with JJ. He is a kid that is very, very concerned about taking care of his mom and his sister. A very family-oriented guy. And, I mean, he and his family have been through the ringer. I know that, very well documented, what's kind of happened with him since he's entered college, especially. But they lost his dad at a pretty young age and stuff, and so I think he just feels a lot of responsibility to make sure everybody's solid and good, and he got an offer that was kind of too good to pass up. I don't know that he's ultimately going to the first place that offered, but I think it kind of awakened him to the fact that he could maybe go someplace else and make more money.
Well, let me just interject. That's the thing about it. I think that's what's turning a lot of people off to the sport, Michelle, is that, yes, offers, this is, like, they're talking about, this is college football free agency. It's what it is, folks. Like, this is the reality of what it is. I know that you're not supposed to have money being the quote-unquote inducement for guys to leave. Guess what? It's happening all over the country, and the sad part is this one caught up with Utah, and you're right. Some of the family circumstances around a guy like Jaquindon Jackson forced him to kind of look at the situation, and he's going to the highest bidder, for lack of a better term. And that's tough to stomach as a college football fan, but that's kind of the reality of what we're dealing with right now.
Absolutely. And I've been asked about this several times this week. I really don't have a problem with these guys getting paid. I fully support that, and I think this is something that should have been happening forever ago. You can't use someone's personality to sell a product and then not give them a cut of that. It's just how we're doing it that really bothers me. And it bothers me that schools, collectives, whoever, whatever, are allowed to contact people that aren't even in the transfer portal and make offers to tempt them to go to the transfer portal. And if I'm being very honest and very blunt, that it's kind of abusive. It's abuse of power, especially when you kind of pick out guys that maybe have some vulnerabilities and dangle that carrot, but don't really make any kind of promises or we'll just go with promises or let them know that there's other reasons that would be good for them as to why they should transfer. And so sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, right? But like it's kind of one of those things. I've often said I think ultimately what we're going to need to see happen with college football, if things continue the way that they're continuing, which I hope they don't, because I just don't think it's sustainable. But if they do, we're going to have to somehow come up with some kind of rookie symposium for high school kids entering college in order to know how to deal with all of this and to kind of identify people that, really are looking out for their best interest versus people that, just want to lure you away, but have no intention of making sure that you see proper playing time or, some of that kind of get the help that you need in order to maybe continue that career if that's the career you want to, continue to pursue. There's just a lot going on that needs to be addressed, needs to be worked on. And I want to make very clear, I don't know if that is, fully what's going on with Jaquindon, but like it could be. And if it's not him, there's other guys that, are falling victim to this. And I think at some point we will start seeing some really kind of sad stories come out where guys jump on the money, but then it costs them down the road. And so there just needs to be some efforts made, I think, to show these guys, bigger pictures as far as, when you entertain a deal like that, to just look at the whole picture and not the immediate future of taking a deal.
Sure, and I agree with you on that. The other thing about this is, and we can expand this out a little bit, you've probably watched some of these bowl games. I've watched a number of them myself because it's bowl season, and a lot of these games, I don't know if you watched last night, Michelle, but it was absolutely brutal. Ohio State, with their third-string quarterback. I saw some jokes from Utah fans, which actually made me chuckle.
Yeah.
Hey, you struggle to score when you don't have your first or second-string quarterback? Yeah, you struggle to score. But these bowl games, by and large, a lot of them have been affected by the transfer portal. Guys exiting the football program, not playing with their team in the bowl game. I actually got to give big props to guys like Bryson Barnes and Travis Broughton for actually suiting up and playing for Utah in that bowl game, even though they're in the portal, because a lot of these guys are exiting, and it's having an adverse effect on the postseason for college football in general.
Yeah, and I think that's something that needs to be fixed as well. And my solution, honestly, is why are we opening the portal as bowl season starts or as postseason play starts?
Sure.
Should we not keep that closed and open it the first day after a national champion has been crowned? And then, to me, I think ultimately what you do is that second signing day that used to be the big day but no longer is because everybody's signing in December, make that the transfer portal signing day. And then there's something to kind of look forward to, that kind of last push before you start gearing towards spring ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then you don't have this mess of, well, who's entering the portal before we play whatever bowl game? Or, at some point, it might even start affecting playoffs as well. So, and especially with the playoffs expanding next year, I think bowl games are maybe going to start becoming a thing of the past. But, so then you have guys that are faced with, oh gosh, do I stay and play in this playoff game, or do I enter the portal or go to the NFL? Just push everything back. It's not that big of a deal.
Well, and that's the thing about it, Michelle. I see all these people saying, well, they've got to be able to transfer and be able to get into school by the time the new term starts. Okay, folks, let's be real. This has never been a purely academic issue. Because if it was purely academics, Michelle, we wouldn't have hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million offers going out to athletes who haven't even officially entered the transfer portal, and them saying, hey, I'm gonna leave now. That if this was academics, yeah, it'd be a much different conversation. But you're right. I think it was Lane Kiffin this week that said that, why are we doing our free agency in our off season while the season is still going? I'm with you, Michelle.
Yeah.
You got to back it up a little bit. And yes, if you have kids that, if you're doing this in January, as you mentioned, kind of leading up to signing day, and then obviously you said the attention turns to spring ball. Guess what? These guys transfer. Either you talk to your school about having a way that they can maybe enroll late and do like a term type option, or you simply tell them, hey, you're going to come play for us, and you're going to have to enroll when spring term or summer term begins at that point. But you're right. You cannot have both your roster changes going on while your team's also playing in the postseason. It does not work.
No, it's produced a lot of hot garbage games, if we're being very honest. So I would like to see that changed. Again, I have no problems with guys wanting to transfer. I have no problems with guys wanting to find a better option for themselves. But let's not do that while there's still games being played.
Yeah, it doesn't square up at all, but it's one of those crazy things out there. You excited, by the way, for the playoff this year? I think we got 2 pretty good games on deck.
Yeah, I'm overall excited, I guess. Maybe not excited, but curious. Mild curiosity, I suppose. Sure. Yeah, that's probably how I would label it. To be honest, I'm way more pumped for next year, when I feel like we're probably going to get a much more true measure of who really should be involved in that with the 12-team playoff.
Yeah, well, let me interject one thing on that. So, for example, last night we had Missouri and Ohio State playing, and Ohio State, okay, they're down. Devin Brown is supposed to play, gets an ankle injury early, isn't able to really participate, and they were down on the third-string quarterback. But on the other side, Missouri, Michelle, looked absolutely dynamite. What could they have done? Like they're one of those teams that kind of flew under the radar all year long, and if this was a 12-team playoff, how dangerous would the Missouri Tigers have been?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of teams like that. I think, there's been occasions in recent memory where Utah could have been that team, and how exciting would that have been, in this community to have that kind of thing going on. But because they didn't rank as high as some others, or they're not the sexy name brand, they kind of got overlooked for that. And again, there's countless teams. You mentioned, Missouri as being one of those teams. And maybe we look at FSU even, it's, let these teams either prove that they do or don't belong, but it should not ever be up to a person or a group of people to be like, like half your rosters being up, we don't think you're going to be any good. Let them prove that. So I'm looking forward to next year. I think next year is going to be super fun, and especially also with the thought of having, at home play-ins and stuff.
Sure,
I mean, can you imagine this place if like Utah or BYU gets an opportunity to host a playoff game? It's just going to be electric. It's going to be absolutely electric. So I'm looking forward to that. I hope someone in this state at some point gets that opportunity with this new system and layout, because I think it'll be incredible. But I am definitely looking forward to just seeing what everybody's bringing, rather than, I think Kyle Whittingham's called it it's not a playoff, it's an invitational. And I think that's absolutely correct.
Well, and I think that points directly to what happened with Florida State this year, Michelle. I've got this conspiracy theory, and I know a lot of people have also shared it, that the reason why Florida State was ultimately left out is they're trying to destabilize the ACC, and you've seen Florida State respond in kind. They've got their lawyers looking at, okay, how can we break this grant of rights with the ACC? How do we get ourselves out of this? Because, in all honesty, I think these powers that be, the power brokers in college football, and they're mainly the TV networks, let's be real, want to create some of these super conferences, and getting a power brand like Florida State let's say into the SEC or into the Big Ten, whatever it might be, is their idea. And you're right, it is absolutely an invitational. It's not been a true playoff, and next year with 12 teams, it becomes more of that, where 12 teams have an opportunity to win it all rather than just 4.
Exactly. And you know what? I will happily wear that tinfoil hat with you.
I'm telling you, I
was going to say, after, all the digging and the conversations and the poking and that I did with conference realignment with the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and the Big 10, like, I absolutely buy that happened and was a reason, and that ESPN probably had a little some to do with that, persuading that decision. So... and for that reason, in order to stock up on who they want and leave the rest behind. So, yeah, I buy it. I'll happily wear that tinfoil hat.
All right. Well, we will take a timeout here. We'll come back on the other side. We'll get into some of the biggest stories for, like I said, for BYU, Utah Jazz from the year that was, because this is funny enough, Michelle, we are doing the final live radio broadcast for the Zone, for the KSL Sports Zone, until the new year begins. So we got the lucky chance to kind of look back, I guess, in a way, in memoriam of 2023, and we'll get to all that coming up next. This is the Saturday Show right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome back to the Saturday Show here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Hatch, Michelle Bodkin along for a ride on this Saturday morning. Hope you all are doing well out there. We have a New Year's Six bowl game underway. We've got number 10 Penn State taking on number 11 Ole Miss in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl down in Atlanta, Georgia. Penn State leading Ole Miss 3-0 early on. Jackson Dart, the former Roy Royal and Corner Canyon Charger. He went into the injury tent for a short minute there, Michelle, but now he's back on the field, obviously. And this is actually a game that has, I think, more juice to it and actually has more athletes than what you're looking at with regards to what happened last night.
I mean, thank goodness. Some of these games have to be good. Some of these games have to feature the people that we want to see, right?
Yeah,
About time.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. All right, so Michelle, we wanted to kind of look back at the year that was for each of these local teams. I want to start off with the Utah Jazz, if you don't mind. And in your opinion, I know that you're pretty hyper focused on Utah, obviously with your role being the Utah Utes insider and everything. But in your mind, what is the biggest story for the Utah Jazz in your mind? Was it the All-Star game coming here? This crazy enough, I think it was February that was here. They had an All-Star in that All-Star game, and Lauri Markkanen unearthed a pretty nice gem in him. What in your mind is the biggest story for the Utah Jazz?
I'm trying to think here.
There's a lot of them. I can tell you that much. I'll tell you one of mine while you consider yours. And
Okay.
I'm going to point directly to the Lauri Markkanen situation, but it's not because he was an all-star, because that was absolutely an incredible thing to see him realize his potential. Obviously had a very nice season this last year, and when he's been on the court so far this season for the Utah Jazz, he's been absolutely marvelous. But the bigger thing for me is there's been so much talk about, okay, is Lauri a trade piece now for the Utah
Right.
Jazz? That's where the conversation has turned, because we have seen the Utah Jazz, let's be honest, it's not been the greatest start to the season, and everybody's saying, okay, well, they're building for the future. Well, with the way Lauri Markkanen's playing, he gets you pretty nice haul of assets. We're talking players, picks, etc. if you were to move on from him. So that's kind of the interesting debate. You've unearthed, a gem in Lauri Markkanen, but is he long for Utah, or are they really going to build around him? That's the big question mark for me. One of the big stories of the Utah Jazz this year is his kind of evolution and how the storyline around him has morphed in a 365-day span.
That's actually a good one. That actually is a good one. I think I actually might lean into the All-Star weekend, and so much of it is I think about what that potentially means for future things here. We're in the process of trying to lobby to bring in an NHL team. We're in the process of lobbying to try and bring in an MLB team. We're essentially going to be hosting the Winter Olympics here, in the not too distant future. So it's, I think something like that just really kind of helps highlight and bring in high-level people that get to check this place out and see what we're all about. And I think that's huge. I think that's huge for the progress of our city and our state in general. But I also think it's huge for our growth and our progress in sports and being a sport town. I think overall it went without a hitch. You had a couple of people complain about how boring we are here. Whatever. You don't know. You don't know. One
True.
weekend does not tell you everything you need to know. And sorry, we're not LA. But not really sorry. But I think for the most part, everybody had a good time and that we showed well. And I think that bodes well for some of the other stuff we're kind of eyeing and wanting to bring in here.
Well, and that's the thing about it. I'm with you on that. We've been starved. I know it sounds weird to say. We've been starved for pro sports in this market. We've had the Jazz forever, obviously, but to have it's potentially an NHL team, an MLB franchise coming to town, that would just be awesome. Because as you mentioned, it brings more people to the state, and we all kind of think about, okay, we want to show off Utah, but at the same time, don't fill it up too much, because
Yeah, I was here first. I've been here for 34 years, and I don't plan on leaving, so please don't price me out.
Yeah, well, that's already kind of happened.
It has already happened.
We're all dealing with that, but nonetheless, it's kind of the interesting part is how much can the success of the Utah Jazz potentially, as you mentioned, kind of yield more pro sports, because we have two different entities out there. We have the Smith Entertainment Group led by Ryan Smith, the current owner of the Utah Jazz. He is apparently in very close talks, whatever you want to term it, with the National Hockey League to bring an NHL franchise here. And then the Millers, who are the former owners of the Utah Jazz, well, they have got everything pushing towards bringing an MLB franchise, and it seems like every move that they're making is very strategic and being very smart about bringing an MLB team here to Utah. And I, for one, I'm with you. It screams to me, let's make this happen, get it done as soon as possible.
Yeah, and it was fun, and it was also fun that they utilized and used facilities at the University of Utah. And, again, that just, to me, that bodes so well to show that we have high-class facilities here, and that we have good restaurants. We have decent nightlife. But if you want to escape all of that, hey, go up to Park City. It's not that far. Maybe get a ski trip in. We have a lot to offer here. And like I said, I just think that was ultimately, we're maybe still not seeing the dividends of that, but I think in the future, that event was going to be just a huge catalyst for things that we want to do in the future.
Sure, and that's the thing about it. So, I guess one of the other storylines, Jazz-wise, that I was kind of looking at is when it comes to what the Jazz are doing, there's so many people that are wondering, well, what's the timeline here? What's Ryan Smith thinking? What's Danny Ainge thinking? How soon are they really going to be back in contention? But they haven't really ever put a timeline on it, Michelle. And that's the thing about it is I actually kind of appreciate it, because if you put a timeline on it, guess what happens? Expectations all of a sudden get heaped upon you, saying, okay, you said 3 years. We're putting you on the clock right now. I actually kind of respect in many ways that Ryan and Danny and Justin Zanuck, kind of the brain trust there for the Utah Jazz, they've actually been very reticent to say, okay, this is how soon it's going to happen. They want to make sure that all their ducks are in a row before they really make sure that they start putting any expectations on it.
And yeah, to your point, I think that's wise. I get that people want instant gratification, but to be honest, something like this, it's pretty hard to do something that's going to instantly gratify, the fan base, especially if you want to do it right, and especially if you want to do anything that might have some longevity that will last, beyond a season or two. I think the real hope here is at some point building a dynasty. And we've had a couple of dynasties with the Utah Jazz in the past. They hadn't quite reached the promised land. They got close, but not quite. And so, I think the hope and the vision here is to, like I said, build that next dynasty. That group of players that everybody's like, oh, do you remember Stockton? Do you remember Karl Malone? Do you remember Jeff Hornacek? Greg Ostertag, those teams. And, and like the Mark Eden era and some of those kinds of things. I think they're in the process of trying to build that, but that takes time. That doesn't happen overnight. This is strategically, as you mentioned, bringing in players, moving players out, testing things out, seeing what works, what doesn't work. And that could take a couple of seasons. So yeah, very wise not to put a timeline on you, because you might guess wrong a couple of times and have to kind of start over. So I think it's going to be interesting to see exactly how long this does take. But I hope, fans will just kind of be patient and let it ride out, because as we've seen with other sports teams here, coming to mind Utah's jump to the Pac-12, obviously that took some time, but the reward was really great, right? So I think we're looking at a similar thing here. It's maybe going to take some time, and it's going to be painful, and there are going to be seasons that everybody's going to want to forget. But the potential to have several seasons in a row that are just incredible and memorable and, all-timers for fans of that entity is huge. But you gotta let it play out.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, let's keep it on the pro sports front. Let's talk about the Real Salt Lake situation this past year. Crazy season. I'm lucky enough to be involved with the radio broadcast here on the Zone for those, Michelle. But RSL, obviously Ryan Smith, a co-owner of Real Salt Lake now, and just one of those seasons that you look at and say, okay, they started off horribly. They go on this incredible run kind of in the middle part of the season, hit another lull, seem to be trending upwards once again, and then get in the playoffs and come oh so close to advancing, but then they kind of crash out. And then a bunch of changes. GM let go. All of the assistant coaches under Pablo Mastroeni were let go. So it was kind of a season of change in many ways for Real Salt Lake, but at the same time, a lot of the things stayed the same. You have guys coming into this franchise that are the highest priced athletes that the franchise has ever signed, but then just yesterday, for example, Damir Kreilach, who has been a mainstay for Real Salt Lake, earlier this week announced that he's leaving the club, and we find out yesterday he's staying in Major League Soccer. He just so happens he's going north of the border to join the Vancouver Whitecaps.
Yeah, this has been another case of, I feel like this team's going through an evolution, and they kind of have been for some time. They're trying to, I think, find their way after kind of the Jason Christ era, which ironically enough, that was a big story. He's coming back
He's back, so that's the funny thing about it.
He's coming back. He's in, a different role, but like he's going to be around the institution, and hopefully, that helps and bodes well for, whatever changes they're trying to make to get back to where they kind of once were. But I think it's been a process since he left and took off for the New York team.
New York City FC, NYCFC, yep.
Yep. It's been a bit of a struggle. It hasn't been a linear move of progress, and it feels like they're still in the process of figuring some of those things out, but I think bringing back an all-timer to the ranks and getting that insight, getting that energy probably is going to help.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you on that. It'll be kind of be an interesting year this year, obviously, because the expectations for RSL with all the high-priced additions they had during the season were that they needed to be top 4 in the West. They ultimately sunk a little bit lower than that, and that cost a bunch of people their job. I'm just interested to see, what they do reorganizing the front office here, obviously, because they're going to bring in a new GM, it looks like, or at least some form or fashion of that. They're going to have new assistant coaches. You're right. There's a expectation for Real Salt Lake in my mind, to be far more competitive this upcoming season, 2024 is what I'm talking about, than for, let's say, the Utah Jazz. But it's because they have shown, that they are in a competitive sphere now, and they have added the athletes they need to be that competitive.
Yeah, and it's interesting, how much coaching or like a GM, some of the front office people can go into either making or breaking a team. Really, as someone that's actually worked in more of that role in the past with the Stallions, it's absolutely critical that you have the right people, not just on the field, but kind of directing and making sure that, things are running smoothly and that the correct decisions are being made. And if you don't have that, it doesn't matter how much talent you have on the field, it's still probably going to fail. And I think that's something that, we saw kind of take place and happen. So it's going to be interesting to see who they choose to bring in and how quickly they can kind of get everybody on board and clicking.
Yeah, it will be. There's no doubt about that. And then one other thing, Michelle, on the pro sports front, we're adding another pro franchise. I don't know how much you've paid attention to this. The Archers, Premier Lacrosse League, is calling Salt Lake City home. They'll be playing out at Zions Bank Stadium there in Harriman. I know that you've paid a little closer attention to Utah lacrosse and the like. The Archers and Utah lacrosse apparently have connections. I was talking with a friend, and he said that the Archers actually a while back took a number of Utah's assistant coaches to be coaches for the Archers. So in a way, there's a connection between those two, and we'll see how PLL does here in Salt Lake City. They've had a pretty good response when they've brought the Premier Lacrosse League out here for some of their, they call them like I said, barnstorming tour in a way for their past couple of years. But to have it as a full-time franchise here, we'll see how that does, obviously, because you have the other likes of the Utah Warriors and rugby. We have the Utah Royals coming back next year as well, which is another big story. Some of these, I call them niche sports. And that's probably the wrong term, but it's what it is. Like, they don't necessarily have the broad base appeal that some of these other teams would have. But the fact that there are more pro sports calling Salt Lake City home, I guess the greater Utah area home, is a positive for all of us.
Absolutely. And yeah, to your point, lacrosse is growing. It's growing in popularity, and especially I mean, it's pretty popular back east.
Yes,
like
absolutely,
it's
yeah.
very, very popular back east. It's not so popular out west, but I think the University of Utah's program is really helping to kind of change that and draw some interest out west. I've also talked in lacrosse is becoming a very big thing in like California high schools. So, it's starting to move west, and I think having a pro team here that kind of complements, your college team in a way and just brings more attention to the sport, I think is huge. And I think it has the potential to do really, really well. It's an interesting sport. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around exactly how it works.
You and me both. Let's be real. I watch it. It's fun to watch.
It
but
is
I don't
fun to
understand
watch.
half of it half the time.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest and clear, I don't understand what's happening most of the time. But I understand goals. I understand scoring. The rest of it, a little fuzzy. But it is fun to watch. And, I would say if you're a sports fan that's looking for something to do in the spring, check out the Archers. Check out the Utah lacrosse team. It's highly entertaining.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's the fun part is you got more and more options available to us. There's no doubt about that. All right, coming up next, we will come back on the other side. We'll get to technical fouls, talk about some of the crazy things that happened in sports this week. I've got one, Michelle, that's a technical foul, and it involves wildlife in Australia. That should tell you everything you need to know.
Oh,
and
I'm
we'll
scared.
get to that next. Yeah, exactly. This is going to be wild. We'll talk about all that next. This is the Saturday Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
If you're coming from the street with dirty shoes on your feet, that's a technical foul. If you switch the radio to some modern music show, that's a technical foul. If you touch the thermostat,
You'll get hit with a bat.
'cause that's a technical foul.
You will feel my wrath.
That's a technical foul.
Personal foul, 69, offense. He was giving them the business.
A technical foul.
Welcome back to the Saturday Show here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Jake and Michelle along for the ride. All right, it's time now for technical fouls, talking about some of the things that have been happening in other sports, I guess just sports in general, that aren't necessarily as fun as typical. But, Michelle, I'm going to have you go first because this one actually has a direct impact on a college football playoff game coming up on Monday.
Yeah. So the NCAA is investigating unauthorized access from a college football program to Catapult. Now, Catapult is a company that provides and handles video footage for college football programs that they look into to study film and practices, that sort of thing. So someone was trying to allegedly breach Catapult and get footage that was not their own. They were trying to look into competitors' footage, and it's just been this whole thing. Obviously, I think everybody's mind instantly goes to Michigan.
Yes.
Michigan is saying that it's not them. I don't know that I believe that, but hey, whatever.
Should we believe anything when it comes to Michigan saying it's not them? Let's be real. Come on.
No, you got caught red-handed. And to be honest, there probably are others that have done exactly what they got caught doing. But the thing is, you got caught, and everybody knows it now. But so there's been this whole investigation launched into it. Catapult saying that they're not finding anything that unauthorized people have accessed their materials, but the NCAA is still apparently investigating it. But it is interesting because I do feel like this also lines up with Alabama came out and said that they're not allowing anyone to watch film on their own in preparation for the Rose Bowl on Monday. So because they are, playing Michigan and no one trusts Michigan. Yeah. So it's
they're allowing players to watch video in groups. They're not allowing it on the individual iPads. Yeah.
So crazy. But so guys, the lesson here is just don't cheat. It never pays off. You'll eventually get caught and it won't be fun.
Yeah, no doubt. There's no doubt about that. All right, sticking on the football front, Christian, you got a good one here. I was going to go with it, but you're a Broncos fan, so tell us of the times and life and storyline of Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos.
Man, so this has just become an absolute mess. So basically, the Denver Broncos are benching Russell Wilson for the final 2 games of the season. It's related to the injury clause in his contract. Long story short, if Russell Wilson were to get injured and unable to pass a physical, he would have an additional like $37 million guaranteed onto his contract. So, of course, with his play being not that great, the Broncos are going to bench him to avoid having to pay him that guaranteed money. But then it came out that this was a decision that they wanted to make a long time ago, apparently. Russell Wilson was reportedly approached by the team following their victory against the Kansas City Chiefs with 9 games left to go. So allegedly they approached him, asked him to change his contract, which he denied, rightfully so. I mean, go get your money, right? So he declined that. And going into the bye week, they said, okay, well, we're probably going to bench you then. And they didn't bench him until recently when they lost against the Patriots. But it's just as, like, morally, it's kind of messed up. But from the business side, I get it. So basically all of Broncos country is kind of divided on how we feel about this move.
Well, okay, here's the thing about this, and Michelle, I'll get your thought on this. Russell Wilson signed a 5-year, it's like $240-some-odd million contract extension, which, by the way, only begins next year. Why in the world would you sign him to such a ludicrous deal when you apparently in your heart of hearts were saying, yeah, we might be moving on from this guy?
And not only that, he signed this contract before he even played a snap for the Broncos.
Correct. Yes, that's the other thing about it.
So he signed this deal with 2 years left remaining on his deal from Seattle that he was previously on. Now,
which he's still playing on currently right now, yeah.
Right. And so now, of course, things have not gone how the Broncos have wanted. Sean Payton has come in. They tried to make it work for a season. They were on the verge of making the playoffs. But their offense sputtered against the Patriots. They lost that game. Now they're all but mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. So Sean Payton wants to go in a different direction. They're going to have to eat a lot of money if they cut Russell Wilson. And sitting him these final 2 games avoids having to potentially pay him even more than what they're already going to have to pay.
It's just crazy. I know a lot of people connected to Russell Wilson, and I've heard a lot of interesting stories about the guy over the years. But what a wild set of circumstances in Denver. Between him and Sean Payton butting heads, which I kind of get it because Sean Payton didn't necessarily choose him, want him, whatever. He just inherited him.
Sure.
But and you would kind of think that relationship would work based off of what Sean Payton was able to do with Drew Brees with the Saints for years and years. But I don't know. Like, there's some strangeness going on. I've heard that Russ can be kind of an interesting guy to work with. In fact, one person referred to him as Carlton to me. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. That just a lot to unpack there. I'm glad that I'm not the one that has to deal with that.
Yeah, no doubt. By the way, apparently, if they do cut him this offseason, Christian, correct me if I'm wrong, it's an unprecedented $85 million in dead money on the salary cap over the next 2 years if they do it.
Yeah, and that is over the next 2 years, so it wouldn't be all at once. I think it's like 39 next year and then the rest of it the following year. But that is, unprecedented. It's crazy, and that shows you just how much they don't want him. And you know, frankly, he's not playing up to a $250 million contract. So right now is the best time to get out of it. It just sucks that they have to eat all of that dead money.
You know what this feels like? It feels like the Jimbo Fisher situation at Texas A&M, but it's a quarterback and it's pro sports. That's just wild.
Yeah. All right. Real quick, I told you guys I had one involving Australia wildlife because like everything in Australia likes to kill you essentially.
Yeah.
So Michelle, former U.S. Open champion, I think it's Dominic Thiem if I'm not mistaken. He had a brush with one of Australia's most venomous snakes during a qualifying match at the Brisbane International on Saturday. Now, the Brisbane International is one of the tournaments leading up to the Australian Open, which I think is in a couple of weeks. But he was the former world number 3. Dominic Thiem was down a set to James McCabe in a first-round qualifying match when fans courtside spotted it's called an let's see, let me check what the name of it is. It is a eastern brown snake, Michelle, and it is one of Australia's most deadly reptiles, and that's saying something considering, like I said, Australia's got like every deadly reptile and animal in the world. Apparently this thing is 50 centimeters long, and it started slithering onto the court towards like the ball boys and ball girls and everything. They had to like call security to come get it off the court before the match could resume.
No, thank you. Hard pass. hard pass. Look, here's
First off,
I was gonna say.
Where are you? Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I don't really have a fear of snakes, but like if it's poisonous and deadly, keep that thing away from me.
Yeah, but they're in Brisbane. Like Brisbane's a pretty big city in Australia. Like how in the world does this snake get even inside the complex? In my mind, that it's all of a sudden like, hey, by the way, I'm gonna go right onto that court here. Let's go.
Do you want another tinfoil hat conspiracy theory? Someone planted it.
Got it. What is it? What we got?
I don't know why. I would have to like look into the situation further to understand maybe possibly why. But for an animal like that to make its way into a pretty, I guess, industrialized place, it was planted. We're going to go with that.
Maybe so. Apparently, the eastern brown snake's venom, it might be the most potent of any snake in the world. So, hey, there you go. So, good times.
No.
We will come back on the other side. We've been talking kind of about the year in review for the local sports teams and programs. We talked about the pro sports a little bit earlier on. If you missed it, you can check out the podcast and get that, where we talked Utah Jazz, Real Salt Lake, etc. Coming up next, we'll kind of focus on the college. We'll talk Utah, BYU, Utah State, etc. We'll get to all that next. This is the Saturday Show right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome back to the Saturday Show here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Michelle Bodkin, Jake Hatch, talking all things going on in the sports world. Michelle, do you have any big? Do you do anything fun for New Year's, or are you kind of low key? Because my house, which is we pull out like all the hors d'oeuvres and we just kind of hang out until it turns midnight, really, around my place.
I've kind of done a mixture of both things the last few years. I've actually been spending New Year in Pasadena with the Rose Bowl. So
sure, good point. Yeah.
So that's been a little bit different, but there were it was called Secret Salt Lake, and they would hold these like New Year's Eve parties and give you like kind of clues that you had to go like sort of find the location. And then there was like a dress code for it. So like they'd have a theme, and one of the parties I went to was like 1920s flapper, like speakeasy sort of thing. Another one was a masquerade ball. So it was like ball gowns and masks. And that was the last one I went to. The people that were doing it moved away. So like they haven't done it for years. But that was something that I used to do. I've done the club thing on occasion, and then there's been years that I've just stayed home, and this year's probably going to be a stay-home kind of year.
Fair enough. I've never heard of the Secret Salt Lake thing. It sounds like actually pretty kind of cool. It'd be kind of fun because you're trying to figure out where it's happening, what's happening, but then, you really don't know until the day of or whatever. Yeah,
it really was kind of cool. It was a little spendy. But it was really fun to, like I said, kind of find the clues, find where you were going, pick out an outfit that kind of goes with the theme. And then, of course, you had the dancing and the countdown and all that kind of stuff. A little bit more of a high-end sort of deal. Like I said, I wish they were still doing it because it was really fun, but I don't think it exists anymore. So kind of a bummer. But, yeah, it was cool while it lasted.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, we continue our theme of the show, kind of looking at like the year in review and the top stories for the local sports teams. And I want to start off. We're going to talk about the college programs here and overall, but Michelle, let's start off on the Utah front here. Whether it's Utah football, basketball, whichever way you want to take it, what in your mind has been the biggest story for the Utes of 2023?
I mean, there's a couple of different ways we could go. I think probably the overall overarching for the entire athletic department is, of course, the demise of the Pac-12 and ultimately moving to the Big 12. I think that affected everyone, every aspect every aspect of Utah athletics that I cover, and it sure dominated a lot of what I was doing for a long, long time, more so than in some ways the actual sports that were going on, which I think in a lot of ways super unfortunate, because Utah athletics actually had a really spectacular year, and I think that was maybe another storyline. You have, I forget how many teams now earn conference championships in that 2022-2023 year, which was awesome, including women's basketball, of course, gymnastics, softball, lacrosse. It was a lot, but it was really, really fun to cover because so many teams did so well, including football. So that was awesome. That was kind of a big story. You look at what happened with Cam Rising and Utah football this year. That was kind of a really big story. The will he, won't he, being on Cam Rising watch week in and week out until they finally
Uno doctors, Michelle. Uno doctors.
Yes,
come on now.
We love the Uno doctor, man. That was quite a trip and a ride. And then, you look at what happened with gymnastics and Tom Farden, another really big story. That I think honestly is still kind of playing out, and it'll be interesting to see where that one goes. But I think those are probably the top stories in my mind of kind of what went down with Utah athletics this year.
Now, so you mentioned a bunch of different ones there. I wanted to ask you just in terms of the football side of things, the whole storyline you mentioned, the Cam Rising situation and does he return from injury, does he not return from injury? But beyond that, it was just an absolutely ridiculous season in terms of you just look at the overall injuries that affected, and it really was kind of the storyline of the Utah football season was all the injuries that they absorbed and were able to kind of keep rolling through, and in many ways it kind of caught up with them in that bowl game finally.
Yeah. I think I'm more of a positive person, so I look at things in more of a positive light. I know a lot of people feel very negatively about it, but I thought it was a good test to see where Utah was at in building depth, because that was such a huge issue for them when they made that jump to the Pac-12 in the beginning years, and that was something that Whittingham and his coaching staffs, emphasized so much. We gotta build our depth. We gotta build our depth. Our depth isn't where we need it to be, in order to make it through a season and be productive. And it's obviously once you start getting into those kinds of depths, you're not gonna be a conference championship team. Nobody is. I don't think even Alabama really, or a USC or Michigan, they're likely not going to win their conference when you're starting to get into 3s and 4s and 5s at various positions. But are you in a place where you can still have a winning season, where you can still kind of compete with some of the better teams? And Utah found out that they're in a place now that they can do that. So I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was actual positive development. I get that fans maybe view that a little bit differently. But I think it was good for Utah to see really where they were at and what they have and maybe where they still need to improve and work on some things. And so I think, the moves that we're going to see, with recruiting and with going into the transfer portal, I think are going to reflect what they learned from this 2023 season. And I don't think that's a horrible thing.
Now, you're making up the transfer portal, and I think that's kind of a storyline for both BYU and Utah, and I'll kind of get your thought on this, Michelle. Is we had Kelly Papinga on with DJ and PK, this is before Christmas, and he kind of, well, he didn't necessarily admit it, but he said that we may have taken too many guys via the portal this past year, and in many ways he thought it might have affected BYU's continuity, some of the gelling factor that needs to happen with the college football program, because you need to have guys that are together for some time to compete. You mentioned the fact that how this season went for Utah may affect how they approach the transfer portal. I can tell you that the way BYU's season went absolutely affected how BYU's gone about the transfer portal this season. They've been a little more, I don't know how to say it, they've kind of slow-played some things, kind of letting things kind of pan out versus really kind of going hard and heavy early on. And I think that Utah's probably in a similar boat. Like, you learn lessons from this, and because the transfer portal is still relatively new, you don't necessarily have the perfect formula quite yet.
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance. I think you obviously want to retain as many people as you possibly can, which I think even though we have talked about, Jaquindon Jackson hitting the portal, like a Mikey Matthews and a Nate Johnson, Justin Medlock, some of those guys are, maybe guys that you want to keep, but like there haven't been enough of them that have left that's really going to disrupt the overall chemistry of the team, right? So they've done a pretty good job at retention. And so, it's a key of bringing in, a strong high school class that you kind of overall hope will be like the core, the nucleus of your group. That most of them will stick around, most of them will grow through the program and kind of build that bond, that brotherhood, build the culture, that sort of thing, be the leaders of the team that everybody looks up to. And then from there, you hope to kind of plug in some weak spots. If you're a little thin at a position group, you hope that you can maybe find a good transfer or two to bring in that will be productive, that will match what your core, what your nucleus kind of brings to the table. But I don't think you necessarily want to build a whole team out of transfers. And you mentioned BYU. We've seen that, I think, with other schools as well. You have, USC. Like, it sort of worked well for them the first year, but it maybe backfired a little bit this year. You have a team like Colorado that in some ways they improved, but did they really improve? Did they have that chemistry? Did they have each other's backs? When you're all strangers and you don't have any familiarity with the program or the culture or the expectations, it's kind of hard to get anything going, in my opinion. So it's, like I said, I think it's a very delicate balance. And I think for the most part, Utah's found a good formula. I think BYU's filling their way, and part of that is out of necessity, right? BYU's just in a very different place. They've made that jump to the P5 level or the P4 or the P3, whatever we're calling it these days. I don't know. But they made that jump. And so they're in that position of needing to build the depth and trying to balance how willing are we to wait for like some of our high school classes to catch up and get with the program versus just diving into the transfer portal and bringing in guys that are maybe a little more ready for the role, but don't necessarily have that chemistry or connection with our program. So I think it's going to be interesting for BYU. It's something that they're going to have to really think about and consider, and they're probably going to try it a couple of times, different formulations, until they find what works for them.
Well, and you're right. They're absolutely right about it. And the kind of storyline for BYU, for me, Michelle, is the fact that they finally made that jump to, as you mentioned, I'm not sure what the term of the Power 4 level, I guess, for now.
Yeah.
But they did make that jump. And did they have some high moments? Yes, they did. They beat Arkansas on the road after falling behind by double digits twice. They've got Cincinnati at home for their first ever Big 12 win. There were some big moments, but the simple fact of the matter is they lost 5 straight games to end the season, and it ended up 5-7. So had a losing year the first year in the Big 12, and they have aspirations of improving. But going back to a point you made right there is that I think both of these programs, and I think BYU realized it after this past year, and they're going to kind of lean more into it, is they want to be more of a developmental football program, meaning they're going to rely more on high school talent. I think Utah's done a really good job with this during their time in the Pac-12, where other programs, as you mentioned, are going to go out there and build their programs via transfers. Look at Colorado. They're the poster child for all of this. BYU realizes, you know what? We're not necessarily going to be able to be as transfer heavy as some of these programs out here. So you know what? We're going to kind of go an opposite direction. We're going to zig while everybody else is zagging over here, and we're going to go after the high school guys. And, yeah, it may take 2-3 years to really build it up, but it's going to hopefully yield benefits with you guys. Speaking of BYU, they kind of cycle up and down, where Utah, they've kind of benefited from this, where every so often you have one of those teams that you've built them up, they become this dominant team, you enjoy that success for however long they're on campus, and then the hope is that success breeds more success in the transfer portal and the high school recruiting ranks, where you can build it. And I think that's kind of the storyline for BYU, is they tried to infuse it with a bunch of talent via the transfer portal, and it had its moments, but I think they realized it's probably unsustainable, really an unsustainable model for BYU as a whole. And now the Cougars are kind of pivoting and saying, okay, we tried it. It didn't necessarily work as well as we thought. We're going to have to kind of reformulate this a little bit. And I think this year they've kind of mentioned, they've looked at the transfer portal as being, okay, we can supplement a little bit, but they're looking more at high school and junior college talent as a way to build some sustainable success, hopefully.
Well, and I think especially with a team like BYU, right, you do have to kind of, I think, look for people that match the mark.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's harder. It's harder for BYU. It's harder for a team like Stanford to do that. It's hard for a team like Northwestern to pull that off, right? You have very specific standards. Now, all three of those schools have very different kinds of standards that they look for in their guys. Obviously, BYU has the religious honor code aspect of it. That's not for everyone. It's just not. And I think, to your point, you look at high school kids, bringing high school kids in, and I think especially what BYU maybe is going to want to really focus on is, local kids that kind of understand and are familiar with it, because it's a hard sell, I think, when you're kind of outside of that picture and you're hearing about that for the first time. It's like, whoa, what do you want me to do? Whereas, you kind of grow up around it, and it's like, you're like, okay, that's maybe asking a lot, but like, it's not so like outside the realm of normalcy for you. I think that's kind of probably where they're going to ultimately want to go, where they're going to want to try and build that nucleus that grows with them and creates that culture for them. And then from there, like you said, supplement, guys that are maybe looking for a last chance that, everywhere else they've tried hasn't worked. So why not give this a shot for like a year or two? Not a big deal, right? Looking for kids that, maybe left out of state that want to come home, I think is another good place for them to look. Utah has a little more flexibility in the kinds of people that they can look for and bring in. I think BYU has to have a little bit more of a rigid plan. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. You have a standard for yourselves. And I think in order to have success, you really need to lean into that. And that's just kind of knowing who you are, knowing who you need to go after, and not venturing too much outside of that.
Sure, that's exactly it. I think that they are, speaking of BYU, they're trying to essentially get to that level. And yes, it's going to take some time to build it. And the other thing about it is NIL is a huge factor for both BYU and Utah. I mean, every football program out there, and every, I guess, college athletics program in general, Michelle, is NIL is a factor here. How much money does your school have, or I guess the collective that's affiliated, or collectives, I should say, that are affiliated with your school? How much money do they have? How much are they willing to give X player here, X player there? And in essence, we've created essentially each school has its own salary cap, for lack of a better term, because you have a certain amount of money. You're doling it out to however many players you've got here, and there are programs who have a lot deeper pockets than others, and that's going to absolutely affect both BYU and Utah, which I think you and I are both in agreement. They're never going to be at the top of having the deepest pockets in the college football universe.
No. I think what the hope is, though, is that some of those schools with the deeper pockets get burned by overpaying for people. And so it will hopefully kind of balance things out a little bit. But for the time being, I think both schools, both teams are going to have to, clench those butt cheeks and say a prayer, because it's going to be a wild, wild ride, to be honest. Because again, this is all so new, and I don't think people have suffered bad consequences from this yet. And until that happens, people are definitely going to overspend. And a team like Utah, a team like BYU, they're not necessarily going to be able to keep up with that. So until it balances out, until people get burned and maybe decide that spending that kind of money on those kinds of players, maybe not a great idea, you might lose some unfortunate battles more often than you would like to. But that I think that's the ultimate hope, though, for both of these programs, is that enough people get burned by making really bad, frivolous deals that they didn't need to make, that it calms down the spending and you're able to keep and retain players that you want to keep and retain.
Yeah, it's a huge part of the math now. It's like, okay, what players do we have on our current roster that we just cannot afford to lose? And yeah, it's a crazy, crazy world out there, Michelle, and it's not slowing down anytime soon, it feels like.
No, it will take some time, I think. It will take some time. People are going to need to learn some lessons, some very hard lessons. And like I said, this is just so new. We're like, year 2 into it?
Yep.
And people, I think, kind of cautiously dove into it. Now we're getting into the crazy, brazen part of NIL, where people are like, oh, well, there's been no consequences, so let's go ahead and do this wild thing. And like I said, I think, in the next couple of years, that's where we're going to start seeing some heavy consequences. Not necessarily that like the NCAA or anyone punishes anyone, but again, it's you spent money that you didn't need to spend, and you didn't yield the results you thought you were going to yield.
Yep, the ROI, man, the return on investment. It's got to pay off, and yeah, I think there's going to be a lesson coming that it's not always going to pay off that way. All right, coming up next, we'll dive into some of the other topics we haven't had a chance to touch on quite yet. We'll talk about the NFL going on this weekend. We're just a couple of weeks away from the NFL playoffs kicking off. We'll get to all that next. This is the Saturday Show right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Accessing.
This is Hans Olsen and Scotty G.
Head football windows exclusively to Utah. Visit their showroom and see the wow factor that these unique windows create. PeachBuildingProducts.com.
Welcome back to the Saturday Show here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. All right, Christian, I've been meaning to ask, why Red Hot Chili Peppers today is our butt back music choice?
Oh, man, I think I'm going to go see them next June. Ooh. They're coming to USANA Amphitheater.
Okay.
I've been heavily debating it, and then I think I'm going to go.
Hey, do it, man. Come on now. They're one of those iconic bands that's been around forever, and they aren't slowing down anytime soon, it feels like.
Yeah, and I really like USANA Amphitheater. I think that's a fun place to go see concerts at. And I enjoy going to concerts, so I think I might send it.
There's only one problem with USANA Amphitheater, and I wonder if you guys have the same thought I have. I love going there. I'm with you. It's an incredible venue, but the parking situation
oh my gosh, it's
awful.
horrendous.
In and out is awful.
That's
Agreed.
my only complaint.
Agreed there.
But Red Hot Chili Peppers, tempting.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. That'd be a fun one to go to, no doubt. That's my only issue with USANA. Outside of that, if I could get in and out of USANA in like a timely fashion, but I would go to more over there. But here's the thing, Michelle, you and I are not. We see the traffic that BYU and Utah football games get. It's pretty bad. USANA is somehow worse.
It is. It is 1,000% worse.
One of those things, but yeah, that'd be a fun concert to go to. I may have to do that one. We've got a really, really fun year ahead in terms of like the overall musicians and stuff that's coming to the state of Utah. Because Blink-182's coming to the Delta Center. Like we've got a bunch of really good concerts this coming year in 2024, folks.
I love good music. I love good musical opportunities. I have not had one in a while, though. So,
well, you've been a little bit busy, Michelle. Come on now.
I have been a little bit busy. Funny story about that, actually.
Okay.
So, my brother came to me on my birthday this past year and he's like, I got you the best birthday gift, until I realized it was not the best birthday gift. And I was like, what? And he goes, I scored tickets to go to TI and do like a meet and greet beforehand or something. I was like, yeah, okay. that sells me. Why was it not a great idea? And he's like, because I realized you'd be in Oregon State that night. So he was still planning on going because he already bought them before he like realized that there was a game that night that I would have to go cover. And I don't know, like later that day he goes, well, you know what? You're going to feel a whole lot better about this. He just canceled the concert, so even I don't get to go.
Well, there you go. Hey, that in some ways that's actually better in a way, so that's always positive.
Yeah, very disappointed, but maybe another time.
Yeah, no doubt. But fun times all the way around. That is kind of the funny thing about the industry that we work in, Michelle. Is we look at stuff and like, oh, that'd be fun to go to, and then you're like, hold on,
nope.
I need to double check and see if the team or teams I'm covering, have games or contests that day. So because if so, guess who's not going?
Yeah, guess who's on the clock? This girl.
Yeah, that's the tough part about it, no doubt. All right, so time for 5 minutes of covering some of the other topics we have not had a chance to touch on quite yet on today's show. Let's talk about the NFL for a moment here, Michelle. Joe Flacco, by the way, talk about like the renaissance of renaissances for a career. This is a guy who's 38 years old. Everybody thought he was completely washed up, and all he's done is serve up 4 wins in 5 starts for the Cleveland Browns.
It's so funny because I saw him trending. I actually didn't realize he was even still playing, to be honest.
I think a lot of people in the NFL are figuring out right alongside you that he's back in the league.
Yeah. Like, since he hung it up with the Baltimore Ravens, I had no idea what he was doing, where he was, if he even still was around. And so, like, it was actually just this past week that I realized he's still playing. And ironically enough, if I remember the moving around, the shuffling, that technically the Cleveland Browns were in Baltimore before they moved to Cleveland. So essentially he's playing for the Baltimore Ravens again.
Yeah, so actually, they do have a connection. They don't have the connection that you mentioned, but
yeah.
So the old Cleveland Browns moved to Baltimore and became the Baltimore Ravens, and then the NFL gave an expansion franchise back to Cleveland because of the move from Cleveland to Baltimore. So yes, there is still that connection to the Baltimore Ravens.
I just had it backwards. Yes. That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's okay. That's okay. But yeah, there is still that connection there between those two, no doubt.
Funny. Very ironic. Love it.
Yeah, no. Other things in the NFL. So we're getting Monday Night Football on Saturday night tonight, Michelle. It's kind of a funny quirk in the schedule. ESPN moved their Monday night contest. The Detroit Lions take on the Dallas Cowboys. They wanted to avoid New Year's night. I can understand that.
Well, Rose Bowl too.
Yeah, as I say, there's all those games on New Year's Day. So, you know what? We'll put it on Saturday night, and it's a good game. Detroit Lions against the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Dallas Cowboys are still absolutely a paper tiger, even though they're 10-5. But the Detroit Lions, talk about a great story in their own right. What Dan Campbell has done has been very, very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit's been a joke in the league for a long time. I mean, really, truly, honestly, like you talk to Lions fans and they've been long suffering. So to actually finally see them kind of shaping up and maybe doing something is pretty exciting. I've been to that venue. I've been to Ford Field before to watch my Packers lose to the Lions years ago. This was like 2014 when Utah actually was in town to play Michigan. We also caught the Packers-Lions game that weekend. And Packers lost. Lions won that game. I don't think the Lions were actually any good that year, and I think that was kind of a fluky loss. But hey, I've been around Detroit. Detroit's one of my favorite cities that I've ever been to, and it was kind of cool seeing that venue.
Well, you talk about them being a joke. Do you know the last time they won a division title, which they have clinched, by the way? They won the NFC North.
Sometime back in the 90s.
1993. It's been 30 years.
Hey, I'm such a good guesser.
Yeah, you are a good guesser. It's been a minute, but yeah, they're one of those incredible stories. This would be one of those games that I could see the Dallas Cowboys coming out and like all of a sudden like really blowing up, and everyone's like, "See, Dallas is for real." I'm like, "They're not for real, folks. Stop believing in Dallas. The Cowboys are not for real. I just don't. They've beaten everybody who's under 500 outside of them. Who'd they beat the other couple weeks back? It was their division game against Philadelphia. Outside of that, the Cowboys have feasted on like lesser opponents.
Yeah. No, I don't. Cowboys have now been a joke for a while, and I don't know. I don't ever trust that they're back. I am very suspicious of Jerry Jones, and I don't think he runs a very good, clean organization.
You and me both. It's just one of those things. By the way, Michelle, we do get a battle tomorrow night on Sunday night between two former college quarterbacks in this state. You have Jordan Love starting for the Green Bay Packers against Jaron Hall for the Minnesota Vikings. Jaron back as the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. His only other start this season. He got that concussion that knocked him out of the starting position. So big opportunity for both Love and Hall as both teams still have playoff aspirations. Whoever wins this game would go a long way to helping themselves potentially get into the playoffs. You lose, you're all but out.
Yeah, that should be a fun matchup. I'm really curious to see more of Jaron Hall. I know that it's kind of been a small sample size, and everybody's been a little bit disappointed that he hasn't been able to play, take advantage of the opportunity with Kirk Cousins being out for the year, because he ended up having his own injury issue.
Yes.
But so hopefully he can get through this game and ball out and show out and maybe show that he is in fact the future of the Vikings franchise.
All right, so Michelle, Puka Nacua, incredible story this year for the Los Angeles Rams. If I were to ask you this, so he is currently, if I'm not mistaken, he's 8 receptions away from breaking the rookie season mark for receptions in a single season by an NFL rookie, and 147 yards away from breaking the NFL rookie record for yards in their rookie season. Over 2 games, if I were to tell you he needs to get 8 receptions, 147 yards, do you think he gets it?
The way he's been balling out, I think he can do it. Again, it's the injury thing. Just don't get hurt, but keep doing your thing, homie, because you've been very, very impressive. That's been fun. That's a guy that I'm excited to see succeed, because his college career was a little bit rocky with the injuries, and so to see him be able to have a healthy season and show that he belongs at that next level is incredible. So I keep it going. I've enjoyed the little bit that I've been able to talk to him over the last year with some of the work that we did with oh my gosh, now I'm just losing.
Kids on the Move.
Yes, Kids on the Move. That was really fun getting to know him a little bit. And obviously I know his brother Samson a little bit better from his time at Utah. But, he just seems like a really great kid, and I'm so excited for him. So that's awesome.
Yeah, the other thing about it is like the Kids on the Move thing. By the way, Hayden Erickson, obviously Ryan, his dad, helps run Kids on the Move. Hayden in the NCAA transfer portal. I'm very intrigued where Hayden ultimately ends up.
I wouldn't necessarily. I have no intel on this. I don't know, and I don't know what he's looking at. I wouldn't be entirely surprised to see him maybe end up at BYU, because they are a BYU family. But he happened to give Utah a shot first. So I could see him keeping it close to home and going down to BYU. That's kind of been the family team for a long, long time. That would be fun to keep him close to home so that we can monitor him as much as possible. But I think that's a possibility for him, and who knows where else he's maybe looking.
Sure, no doubt. All right, Michelle, on the football front real quick, college football playoff, the semifinals coming up on Monday. You'll first at 3 o'clock have the Rose Bowl, at 3 o'clock Eastern time, excuse me. It's 1 o'clock Mountain. No, it is 3 o'clock Mountain time, excuse me. I'm screwing myself up. But number 4, Alabama, number 1, Michigan, and they'll follow that up with the Sugar Bowl between Texas and Washington. Your thoughts on these two matchups? Who are you expecting to advance and play on the 8th for all of the marbles?
Ooh. That Michigan-Alabama game in the Rose Bowl, I don't have a good read on. I'm not sure on that one. I do like Washington, though. They're just this weird team. Everybody, has kind of been doing they're just lucky. Oh, well, they're not really that good. Well, someone's going to eventually knock them off. They're just a team that gets it done by any means possible. It's no excuses for them. They get to work and they get it done. And it might be the ugliest thing you've ever seen. And yeah, you might sit back and go, wow, you guys are so lucky to walk out with that win. But it doesn't matter. It's still a win. They've just been that team this year. I think I've made the comparison. They remind me a lot of the 2008 Sugar Bowl team that just they had some head scratcher games. Why are you playing this team? So you should be blowing this team out of the water. And yet here you are, blowing a team like Alabama out of the water. Make it make sense. But I think Washington's just that kind of team. So I like them in that game. I'm hoping that they advance over Texas. I think it's highly ironic that Sark is playing against his old team this year.
Yes.
But that's kind of my expectation. I think Washington gets it done because they've just been a team that's gotten it done all year. But as for what happens with Michigan and Alabama, I don't know, man. I don't have a good read on that one.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because you're right. There's that whole storyline, Sark going up against Washington, and Washington fans were upset they could never really get over the hump, and he's got Texas here in the playoff going up against the Dogs. I'm with you, Michelle. There's just something about this Washington team. When you're the only team in the Pac-12 era to have made an undefeated run through the conference, when annually it felt like there was going to be chaos, when they have just beaten everybody put in front of them, I got a hard time saying that I just don't see Washington advancing here.
Yeah, I'm bought in. Hopefully, I don't regret that that choice. Don't make me regret it, Washington. But I think I believe in them. I think they got a little something going on. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. On the Alabama-Michigan one, until you knock off Alabama, Michelle, until you quote, they put like that stake through the heart of Alabama and really knock them out, I have a hard time believing that they're not going to take down Michigan. But we'll see. It'll be interesting. It's the Rose Bowl. It makes me jealous every time I watch that game because of the weather. And you got to experience the last 2 years going down there to Pasadena. It's one of those games that makes you Jones for being there in person.
Yeah, very, very lucky to have been able to experience that and experience it the way that you're kind of supposed to experience it, right? Because it's going to be different moving forward. It just is. But yeah, incredible to be able to do that back to back.
Yeah. All right. We will come back on the other side, wrap up this edition of the Saturday Show, the final segment of 2023. Coming up next, this is the Saturday Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome back to the Saturday Show here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Michelle Bodkin, Jay Catch, breaking things down in the sports world. All right, Michelle, we've covered a lot of topics on today's show, but it is the end of the year. Is there anything that you're looking forward to in 2024 sports-wise that you kind of want to put on the record right now?
Ooh. You know what? I'm curious to see how all this conference realignment goes. I think that's going to be intriguing. I wouldn't say I'm excited for any of it. To me, it's all pretty stupid, in my opinion, and was very unnecessary and did not need to happen. But I'm curious to see how everybody kind of deals with what they signed up for. And again, I think at the beginning of the show, right, we talked about, these players having money dangled in front of them, but not necessarily having people around them saying, hey, like, this could be have you looked into this? Have you thought about this? There's other things that should be considered. I think the same thing happened with conference realignment. And, people are now going to have to lay in the beds that they made.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is we're at risk of having another summer dominated by conference realignment if this Florida State stuff really does go down.
Yeah, and that will be fascinating to watch. Thank goodness I don't really have to say much about that. Not my problem. But it will be interesting to watch from afar and see if the cage rattling that took place with the Pac-12 and Big 12 also takes place with the ACC, and if it doesn't eventually yield the desired result for the parties that are doing the cage rattling.
Well, sure, and I'm with you on that. There is a lot of stuff going on, but yeah, I've got some thought in my head, Michelle, that at some point we're gonna see almost a reconstitution of certain conferences because of it feels like the unsustainable nature of some of this, but that doesn't feel like a 1 year fix. That feels like something that's maybe years down the line, but we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see how everything kind of shakes out, who ultimately realizes that maybe we were a little too hasty in making that decision there, but at the same time they're making a lot of money on top of it all the same.
I mean, maybe. Again, I don't know that people really thought through the expense. So are they really making the kind of money that they think they were going to make? I don't know. I'm not convinced, but
yeah.
Again, not my problem. I'm just here to give an opinion on it. So
what are you talking about, Michelle? Come on, you have all the decision-making power. Come on now.
I should. Because we would not be in half the messes that we are in the sports world if I had all the power. But it is what it is. So you just kind of go along for the ride, and I guess occasionally have moments where you go, "I told you so." Not that my "I told you so" matters in the grand scheme of things, but hey.
There you go. All right. Well, for Michelle, I'm Jake. Have a great New Year's, everybody. We'll be back on Tuesday with live programming here on the KSL Sports Zone. Thanks to Christian for producing as always. This has been the Saturday Show on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.